We all have a story, and at times we feel we're walking it out alone. Let's pause and think. Join us for honest conversations about adoption and parenting as we lament, encourage, give hope, and explore our true identity and worth in Christ. Well, hello there. My name is Jackie Darby, and I am here with a podcast, Pause and Think. And this is a ministry off of Whose Am I? Our book that came out last year. We were so excited about our book, Aisha and myself, who is my co-author. And next episode, you're going to be hearing from her as well. But today we have an amazing story that is going to be told by some very special people that I got to know really well last year. Matthew and Brooke McGee. Matthew is the associate publisher for our book, Whose Am I? And Matt, you have been an amazing leader for Aisha and I in leading this whole publishing process. And through you, I got to meet your amazing wife, Brooke. And you guys have an incredible story to tell. And so I just want to hand it over to you guys and let y'all introduce yourselves and tell the listeners about yourselves, and then we'll get into the podcast.
How about you go first, ladies first?
Sure. I'm Brooke. I'm a fellow mom, an adoptive mom, homeschool mom, busy mom, all the things. Matt's wife. It kind of sums me up, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And as you can see that Brooke is beautiful on the outside, but also on the inside. And it is an honor for me to call her my wife. Of course, Jackie, as you said, I'm the associate publisher for Spanish at HarperCollins Christian Publishing. I have the honor of directing the Harper Enfoque, Grupo Nelson, and Editorial Vida imprints. And I am so grateful that our paths crossed. And my path crossed with Aisha's so many years ago, and now just a few years ago, being able to meet you. I am an adoptive parent like Brooke, and I'm the father to Josiah and Yvette, and I'm the lucky man who gets to call this woman to my left my wife.
Well, that's so sweet. And you guys are such an amazing team. And yes, you're right, Matt. I am so thankful that the Lord crossed all of our paths, all four of our paths, and that we're working together for his kingdom. But today, I want to highlight y'all's story, your adoption story. But I want to start out with a question. When did the idea of adoption first come to each of you? And were you always on the same page?
Well, I think it's really interesting just how the Lord writes all of our stories so differently. And then you see in a marriage how he so beautifully intertwined those stories together. And so Matt and I each have our own, each of our families. We have stories of adoption. My grandmother was adopted. And so I grew up with that very much being just such a beautiful concept, just seeing her life, seeing how she was raised by godly parents who loved her so much. And then just seeing how she's just been such a legacy in our family. And so that's just part of my heritage is an adoption story. And so I'm very grateful for that. So that's something that's always been just interesting to me. And the Lord used that definitely to prick my heart. And I'll let you, I guess, say how you were introduced to the idea, and then we can talk about together how we came to that decision.
Yes, I have a sister who, although officially not adopted by my family, it certainly feels like it. She came to live with us when she was an adolescent and essentially calls my parents just about mom and dad, and her children are the cousins of our children and my nephews, and she's my sister, and my parents are grandparents to her children, etc. So the idea wasn't really foreign to us at all. And I'll just give you a little bit of the backstory on how we arrived at actually deciding that the Lord would have us adopt. We've never had trouble conceiving as a couple. However, we've had trouble keeping a pregnancy. And in fact, Josiah is a miracle child, Josiah, our first son. And we almost lost him in utero as well. So we took that as God's providence to perhaps make adoption part of our family's plan. And when we moved back to the United States from living in the Dominican Republic, and this would have been in 2017, we started to talk seriously about it. And in January of 2018, we actually attended our first orientation in Florida with an organization there that specialized in adoption.
So I never knew that about y'all, that you each had adoption in your families, which just makes it so much
Mhm.
more special and touches my heart knowing I didn't even know that. And
Mhm.
so that just shows, I just see God's hand in all of this, how he united our hearts together. And so that's really special. I'm
Mm.
thinking to myself, wow, my grandkids one day might be telling the same story you're telling, Brooke,
That's
about,
great.
my grandmother was adopted, and just how that was a positive seed planted in your hearts. And then
Yes.
through, it sounds like some painful, very painful situations of losing babies and not being able to carry them full term, God used your pain to plant the seed of adoption even into your own personal lives as a couple. And we met your son. He's an amazing young man, and just how,
Mhm.
like you said, he's a miracle. But God had more to the plan. And so that just really touches my heart, hearing about how adoption was just planted in both of your lives many years ago through your own personal families. So I have another question. How did you decide on an international adoption versus adoption just maybe within the States?
Well, I think we were living in Florida at the time, and just from the stage that we were at currently with our son, our biological son, we were looking at maybe domestic adoption. We weren't really sure what the Lord had for us, but we just knew that He was calling us to do that. And so we were just going to take some first steps and just trust Him to open and close doors. And that's exactly what He's done. Obviously, we know that God is sovereign over all of those doors. And so we are just obedient to walk through them and just to trust Him in that. So it turned out that we were on a waiting list for quite a while. There was kind of some things going on in the organization, maybe some chaos, long waiting list. We're not, that's okay. That's part of our story too, is that the Lord would have us wait, even though we thought we were ready then. We also are we were close to several families that were fostering, and so we got quite attached to a little girl in foster care and went through the foster care system to try to adopt and pursue this little girl. I met with the birth mom and everything, and it seemed like that would be what the Lord would have for us. However, that her story changed, and she was no longer adoptable. And we're very grateful for how her story has turned out, because it's turned out to be a beautiful story over the years. We've kind of followed her, and she's got a really beautiful story, and ended up being adopted with several other like half siblings that were not adoptable at that time that we were pursuing her. So, we definitely had some heartbreak there, but the Lord sustained us through that, and also just kept reminding us of His faithfulness through all of that pain and waiting. We moved again to Tennessee, and as soon as we got here, we still knew that the Lord was calling us to adopt. And so we immediately, once we got settled here, started asking around in our church who's adopted here, who's had a good experience with certain agencies. Just started having coffee with folks and having great conversation about the Lord and just their adoption stories. And the Lord led us to a beautiful organization, Lifeline. And so we got connected with them, and over one cup of coffee, we went from maybe domestic, we weren't really sure, to back to international
Mm.
adoption, which was kind of always
Mhm.
our, just kind of deep down. We love Latin America so much. We love Spanish. And so that's kind of always been just, I guess, kind of deep down what we
Mhm.
had hoped. And things were moving along again after COVID, as far as adoptions go, for a couple of countries. And so we started pursuing that route.
Yeah, and if I
Well,
could
I
add,
can hear.
go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead, Jack.
sorry. I just
Okay.
wanted to jump in and say, you're sharing your story in minutes, but I can feel the years
It was a lot of
and the emotions that could have and probably did go along with those years of waiting and, having a foster child and giving her back. And of course, I understand it's always the heart to reunify the family. But as a foster parent, somebody who's caring for that child, you do get attached. And, there's just some major emotional things that go along, and there's heartbreak and tears. But I love hearing how through it all, you guys just kept seeking the Lord and saying, God, whatever is your will. And so go ahead, Matt. What do you want to add to this story?
Yes, we thought that domestic adoption was going to be easier, but it turned out that international adoption, at least in our case, was much easier. And of course, as we have traveled and lived in Latin America, we have fallen in love with it. Of course, I can imagine the same is true for you after being in Guatemala for so long, you and Randall, your husband. But when Brooke came home, I can remember her coming home from meeting with the representative here in the state of Tennessee with Lifeline, which is based out of Alabama. She says, "Have you ever considered Colombia, which is where we adopted our daughter from?" And I said, "No, but I've been there before." And of course, Brooke and I have traveled in that northwest section of South America, and it's a culture that we really love, and we could see ourselves easily adopting from that area of Latin America. And I don't even think we had to think twice about it. It was just, yeah, let's go ahead. I think the Lord's directing us at least to consider it. And then, of course, after a week or so, it was obvious that He would have us adopt from there.
And the other part of that too is our son at that time was much older and kind of a different stage, much more settled after moving back to the U.S. Because we had a lot of transition for those years in Florida. And so he was much more settled, and we were at a place where we felt like we could take on more and look at there were huge needs for sibling group adoptions and more severe special needs. Those kids are just a lot harder to place in homes. And so we felt like we were at a place where we could say yes to a lot of things. And so we were pretty open to whatever the Lord had for us. So that's kind of another part of that story. Had a vet been available back then,
we would have missed out.
We would have not been able to handle that at the time. So anyway, just all part of our story.
So do you guys feel that maybe there were more hurdles in an international adoption versus domestic, or maybe the same, and it just depends the route God sent you on?
I think it just depends on what the Lord has for you. For us, it was, several closed doors and waiting and heartache, but we also had just such testimonies of God's faithfulness in those times, and our marriage, just grew so much through those years that I feel like we were much more prepared to handle some of the challenges with this adoption and any strain and stress that did put on our family just in bringing her here. And so we just trust the Lord's sovereignty in that. But
very true. And we didn't miss out on a vet. She's the one, who the Lord had for us all along.
Right.
And the 5 or 6 years we spent in the process were just years of preparation for us before actually, bringing her and welcoming her here into our home.
What I hear is endurance, perseverance, and just staying on the track that God had for you, despite the hurdles and the heartache and the tears. But you were just so persistent, and I love hearing that. And sometimes the picture of adoption is just painted with rose-colored glasses, and now you're enjoying, the beauty of it. But up to that point, it wasn't all rose-colored glasses, and you guys certainly endured and persevered to wait for the gift God wanted to truly give you. And so my heart, I don't want to get emotional,
Mm.
but it really touches my heart as an adopted child, hearing just what you as parents have gone through and walked through for us as children. And I know that one day Yvette's going to be sitting in my shoes and being able to express and share what you guys have done for her, because my parents aren't alive anymore. They're with the Lord, and they are not hearing what I'm expressing now. But it brings the whole story into, it's not completed because Yvette's a little girl, but it's beautiful. There is a beautiful, ending. I know you still have many, many years to go.
Mhm.
And I know there's still going to be trials and things you're going to have to walk through, but our heart is to give hope. So with that, what kind of encouragement can you guys give fellow parents who are maybe even thinking about adopting, or who are in this waiting, enduring process, or even maybe have their child like you guys do? So what kind of encouraging words can you guys give as parents?
Well, I think huge amounts of just my growth and closeness with the Lord came during, of course, pain, during times of waiting, during those times. And so, God is good in the waiting. He's good in the yeses. He's good in the nos. And I think we have just learned to trust Him with opening and closing the doors, and just to walk through them and trust what He has for us, and know that if it's hard, He'll sustain us through that. And if it's beautiful, that will either way, we're just a testimony to His glory and to His sovereignty. And that those are not easy lessons learned, I guess, but I'm just so grateful for those. At the time, it's hard, but
Hmm.
I'm grateful for the things we've learned through them. And then just one other quick thing, and then is that too, when we kind of the story, I know we'll probably go into more detail about our adoption of Yvette, but just when that door opened, it flung wide
Hmm.
open, and I mean, just the floodgates opened of
Hmm.
funding, the grants, the timing of everything. It wasn't like it just peeked open, it flung open. I mean, we saw her
Wow.
picture and we were like, that's our daughter. We're coming to get you. And it just all happened very quickly. I know not everybody's story is like that, obviously, but we were just in awe of that. And I guess it just really helped us to trust the Lord even more, just seeing His faithfulness in that. So,
Yeah, there are two expressions that come to mind. One is the hand of God won't lead you where the grace of God can't keep you. And also stay the course. If you've ever seen the movie The Patriot, that was a major theme, to stay the course. And
Mhm.
it's a bit daunting when you first set out, because you don't know whom you're going to adopt. You don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know what the obstacles are going to be. I think one of my biggest fears, especially as a husband, and I have the analytical mind in the group, is how am I going to pay for all of this? Well, the Lord provided for that in ways that surpassed all
mhm.
understanding. Um,
Mhm.
and it's just it's something that I am so glad we were obedient to do, because although we are providing a home where a vet can thrive physically, emotionally, and most importantly, spiritually, we're doing those things as well. The type of sanctification that she is bringing to us, I think, has been
Next
more
level.
valuable for us than we ever would have even
Yeah,
considered or
absolutely.
guessed at the outset. Um, and so when it becomes difficult, not only in the process of getting all the paperwork together, getting everything apostilled, of having all tests run, all of the red tape, and it's necessary red tape in the process of adopting, you must stay the course. And also, when you know that child, see that child for the first time, you must stay the course. And when you bring him or her home, you must stay the course, because that's actually when it starts to, I think, become the most difficult. Stay the course.
And I would just, if anyone out there is just kind of considering adoption, or it's just been something that maybe has been on your heart, but you think, oh, I don't know if I could, or I'm not sure. If it's just even remotely there in your heart, I would just encourage you to not only to seek the Lord and to be to prayerfully consider that, but just do something. Have a cup of coffee with somebody who has been adopted or has adopted, or just talk to people, find out their stories, and in doing that, the Lord's He's gonna guide you and lead you. But I would just encourage you to take some steps. I know that you guys with all of your resources have great connections for people. So just do something.
Yeah, that's great. Great encouraging words to parents who maybe even have a little thought of adoption. And, I just want to thank you both for just opening up, sharing how you got to this point. I know Yvette is just a little girl still, and she's probably not able to express at this point all of her Thanksgiving. She's not at the age where she fully understands how God's writing her story, but I can see it being way further down the road. And I just want to express to both of you how special your story is to hear adoptive parents, again, like I said, the endurance, the perseverance, everything you went to get to this point. Because I know I certainly wouldn't be sitting on this end. We definitely wouldn't have the book, Whose Am I? If it wasn't for you as adoptive parents and Matt, you as an assistant publisher who caught the vision, didn't just catch the vision, but your heart is so entwined in our heart. Aisha's heart as another adoptive parent, my heart as an adopted child. To just talk about adoption and share our stories, because it's God's story and it's his heart in adoption, because he's our Heavenly Father. And so I just want to thank you both. I want to thank you as listeners for listening today to Matthew and Brooke's story. But I want to tell you to please join in again for another episode, because Aisha is going to continue interviewing them and allow them to share about their adoption with Yvette. And so join us again in the next episode of Pause and Think to hear part 2 of their amazing story. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Pause and Think. For more resources and information, go to whosami.org.